All right, today guys, in the video we're doing now, we're going to be tracking down a noise in the front suspension area. So if we kind of zoom in on this driver's side wheel and we have a helper start to bounce the front bumper, we've got this kind of squeak going on. And if we stop for a second, you know, I can tell you there's a number of things you can look at here, right? This could be something coming from the bushing. It could be coming from the bushing itself or the bushing in conjunction with the control arm or the frame. It could be coming from the shock. We can't see in this view. It could be coming from either the upper or lower ball joint. So if we go ahead and repeat that recreate and we grab a tool here, and the tool I'm going to use here is just a long piece of metal, because the sound we're hearing is coming from vibrations that are happening where the source is, and of course we're hearing those vibrations move through the air as sound waves. But what we want to do is we want to feel those vibrations in order to narrow down where it's coming from. So let's go ahead and recreate the problem. And we're just going to be touching on these various components to see where we feel the vibration. All right, the vibration is, I'm feeling a very distinct vibration now on the shock absorber. If I touch the bottom of the shock absorber, I don't feel it as great as on the top. All right, go ahead and stop a second. So let's see if we are actually able to use our hand here. Go ahead and recreate it again. So whenever we grasp the upper shock shroud, it gets muffled. Doesn't really do anything by grasping the lower part of the damper itself. Definitely gets muffled along the top. So we've found the source for sound. It's the shock absorber. So in order to inspect this further, we've got a new upper control arm dust shield we put in here recently because the old one cracked. We're going to need to pull that. And we're going to pull that by removing these push pins that are along the perimeter with a trim tool. I'll show you that in just a second. I don't think we'll need to remove the wheel. We'll pull this guy off and we'll turn the wheel so we can get a view from this side. And we'll see if we can just release one of the mounting bolts on the shock and see if that makes the sound go away to confirm our diagnosis. All right, guys, I'm just going to take a plastic trim tool and we're going to go around and pop out these push pins. And if yours is damaged, your shield, your dust shield, or if these pins are missing or damaged, I will put a link in the description where you can get replacements. Both are still available from GM, fortunately. Okay. And we don't necessarily have to take it all the way off. This is good enough here. So I think we can probably see what's going on maybe here. What we see is the bushing on the top of the shock here. Pretty old shock absorber. It looks like it may have given out. It's slid off to the left here on the sleeve. So, you know, you might, if you had a temporary fix, you might pop in here with a pry bar and try to move it over, but I can see the problem is most likely where the metal right down there in the corner might be rubbing together. You know, the upper dome of the shock absorber and the lower curve of the mounting shroud there. But given that is the case, and these are old anyway, I think I'm going to elect just to replace it. So we're going to come in on the other side, and we're going to drop the bottom bolt first, and then we'll drop the top bolt. All right, guys, we got an 18 millimeter nut on this end, and then an 18 millimeter head on the bolt. So we're just going to use a 18 millimeter box end wrench on the inside of the bolt head. You can work it up against the lower control arms. Can't see it in this view, but there's a cross piece that's going over, so we got this up against that. Then we can take an 18 millimeter socket with a breaker bar and get the torque broke on this bolt, or this nut rather. Once we got the torque broke, we can switch to a ratchet. And we can get it the rest of the way off. It's a pretty easy repair on a 3/4 ton like this. If you got a 1/2 ton, you might have to jack it up to get enough clearance. All right, we can get our bolt off here. Or excuse me, our nut, gosh, washer. Work the mounting nut through. Right, that's all that's holding this guy. So now we're just going to compress the damper here a little bit. I'm going to get it into a position where it's not touching anything. Let's just take a paper towel here and make sure it's not touching anything. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go over and try to recreate the problem. So actually, let me take the camera here. Have my helper go over and try to recreate the problem. And let's see if we still hear it. Very subtly. And all I have to do to stop it is just kind of lift up on this guy right here. So yep, it's definitely the shock. Let's go ahead and flip to the top and pull that bolt. All right, guys. Top nut and bolt head are the same, 18, except on this case, we're going to grab the head of the bolt with the breaker bar, and we'll use our box end wrench on the nut itself. And a flashlight. Let's find a different home for them. There we go. All right, let's switch to our ratchet wrench. Well, maybe I switched too soon. Still on there tight, tight, tight. All right, guys, I won't necessarily bore you with working this whole bolt out. We'll go ahead, it's pretty long. We'll go ahead and work him out. Right before the end, we'll come back. All right, guys, almost to the end here. Decided that the easiest course of action was to use the gear wrench on the nut end and just keep the breaker bar on the bolt head. It's a really, really long bolt. And we had to fight some corrosion here near the end. So we had to use a little bit of PB Blaster to get this guy off. All right. There's our mounting nut. There's our shock bolt. Take a little pry bar here. This guy out, and there's our shock. So let's pull him out. Let's have, actually, no, let's take the flashlight first. Let's see if we see any wearing. Yep, there we see that. If we zoom in here, if I can get the light at the right angle, and we can see there's our wear mark on the metal. So that's what was going on. And if we take a look at the shock itself, there's our wear marks on the shock itself. So this is definitely what was causing the sound. Is this bushing has failed in the top of the shock, and it has allowed this inner sleeve to slide out. Now, unfortunately, GM doesn't service for this particular, stock shock. They don't service the bushing anymore. They want you to get a whole new shock. Now, this particular one is kind of old. I'm finding that, it's very easy for me to pull it and push it apart. I should be having to struggle a lot more than I'm having to do here. So it's probably a good idea to replace this anyway. We can also see that the bottom one is failing. Bushing's all cracked, moving away from the mounting sleeve, and it's about to move out from this side into that side anyway. So time for new shocks. So let's go ahead and grab those part numbers and pop them in. All right, the GM number on these for this particular type of truck, this is an old body style GMT 400, either a K2500. It's part number 220-64333. This is the same for the GM number as well as the AC Delco number. This is kind of a ratty looking box. These numbers are not a discontinued number, but you can often get this kind of part cheaper at a car show or something of that nature on eBay, and box might not be really great shelfware wise, but it's obviously a brand new shock absorber inside, and we can see that this is what our bushing should look like, right? It should have no cracks in the rubber, and there should be a tight seal between the metal sleeve. In fact, the rubber, when it's molded, kind of spills over onto the metal, as you can see on both sides here. And similarly on the bottom, you should have no cracks, and this guy should be molded on. So installation is basically reversing what we did. Now this guy here is like really, really hard to pull apart. You just kind of have to give slow, steady pressure, and eventually it'll come apart. So it shows that, that's also part of the problem. So we're just going to pop this guy back in, and I'll give you the torque values. All right, we're just going to guide this guy back in. All right, it can be a little bit stiff going back in, guys. I might block your view for a moment here. Try to use this punch to see if we're lined up with the holes. If we got enough room to get in here with this. There we go. Okay, so she's still a little bit off on this side. It's still off. Feel it's just off a hair here. Let's see if we can move our flashlight over a little bit. Yeah, I've just got to go in a little bit more. Guys, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get a different tool here because I want to be able to get a little brass punch in here and just give a couple of whacks right on that corner. All right, guys, you just need to come in here with a little punch and give a hit. And actually, when I was just doing a test hit, it popped right into position. So unfortunately, I can't show you popping it in, but that's all I did. When I did that, boom, we're ready to go. So we'll put the nut on the other side. Get that started by hand. And then we'll ratchet that back on. Let's go ahead and put the bottom in. All right, guys, I didn't necessarily show this when I torqued that top bolt nut washer assembly. What we noticed, there was a mistake previously, maybe even a factory mistake. That washer is not supposed to be on the bolt side, it's supposed to be on the nut side. So we flipped that we took it off and we flipped that washer to the nut side before we torqued it down. 66 foot-pounds, top and bottom. All right, so let's come down and do the bottom now. And something else I'll point out while I'm doing this here on the top, you'll notice that the nut down here on the bottom is going to be facing the rear of the vehicle, and the head's going to be facing the front. And technically that's how they're both supposed to be. But I have it backwards on the top just because that's easier without having to remove the upper control arm. All right, so now I'm just going to put a punch in here so we can drag this guy down into position. It looks like it's about lined up. We'll go ahead and grab our dead blow hammer or a rubber mallet, whatever you have handy. Get some other tools ready here so that we can complete lining this up. All right. Now on this one, we'll install it the service manual way, where the bolt head faces the front. Looks like we got a little bit more of an alignment job to do. We'll just see if we can get this going up. So we'll come in from this side. Until we get it lined up. Then we should be able to come in from this side. Then we'll put our washer on, and then we'll put our nut on. Now, that's how the top is supposed to be as well. But like I said, we kind of rotated the assembly around just because it is easier. Okay, now we're going to go ahead and torque this guy down to 66 foot-pounds as well. And then we'll come back and we'll see if we can recreate the problem. All right, guys, let's take a quick peek at the service manual. This 98 second edition was the last one for these old body style trucks for the years that are covered in the video title. Let's see, we're going to look for four-wheel drive. Here we go. So here's the drawing I was talking about. So here you can see the bolt, the washer, the nut, top and bottom. It's just important to get the washer and the nut on the same side. We mentioned that we fixed that problem on the top when we did this replacement, but we chose to reverse the top because it's easier, because otherwise you'll have an obstruction with the upper control arm. The torque on these is 66 foot-pounds for the upper and the lower. So let's go ahead and do our recreate and see if we're good. All right, guys, we've got our upper control arm dust shield repositioned, and now we're going to go ahead and try to recreate that problem. Nothing. Perfect. So this tells us two things. So one, we know it's a good repair, and two, we know it was just on this side, even though it was loud enough from the cab where you might have thought it was coming from the passenger side or both. Now, you should always replace these in pairs, so even though there's no problem with the passenger side front shock absorber, we're going to go ahead and replace that as well. So that'll be the same as what we showed here, just the mirror image. I hope this video helps you out. If you got any questions or comments about the repair, go ahead and leave them below. I'll try to help. If you found this video useful, it saved you some money, or you just found it interesting, go ahead and hit that like button. I'd really appreciate it. Otherwise, thanks for watching.